X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Atom. This is your weekly X-Men podcast where we ranked every story from A to Z.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Zach. Hey Adam.
How you doing, Zach?
I've been thinking a lot about our enemies. As you know, we have many of them.
We do.
I've been thinking a lot about, the weak, those who aren't worthy. And I've thought about a lot of things that they've done. And I've looked at it and I've decided everything they built will fall. And from the ashes of their world, we'll build a better one. That's my Oscar Isaac impression. It's not very good.
You know what? If we painted you blue, or purple, sorry, you might be able to pull that off. You know what I mean?
I couldn't be worse than him. I couldn't. I love Oscar Isaac. He was working with some loaded dice there.
Yeah, not a lot to work with there, Mr. Isaac. I guess from that monologue, we're talking about Apocalypse this week.
Yeah, that's the name that humans are allowed to call him. It's Apocalypse.
Yep. And this is, sort of standard Apocalypse, not present day as we know him, Pox to Ten of Swords Apocalypse.
This is not the Apocalypse that we met last week, who was both wildly supporting and uplifting of people and also stabbing small children in the chest. He's only one of those in this.
Yeah, but we get some very unique angles on Apocalypse, and I thought we were going to start with some Age of Apocalypse, but this is not an Age of Apocalypse. This is plural. This is Ages of Apocalypse.
Yeah, Ages. It's very similar to, how Marvel did Marvel's Superhero Secret War.
Yes.
And they did Marvel's Superhero Secret Wars too.
Yes.
Well, then they did a thing called Secret War, which was not plural. But then they also did another thing called Secret Wars, which was plural again. Which tells me that Marvel's got to stop doing it because it's really confusing when they do this. Ages of Apocalypse is wholly unrelated to the Age of Apocalypse, a event that we will be talking about sometime in the fall again, which is exciting.
Who do we have to thank for requesting Ages of Apocalypse, Zach?
We got Matthew Thompson to thank. Matthew went on over to patreon.com/comicsxf, tossed a couple of dollars into our coffers and said, fellas, I'd love it if you would talk about Ages of Apocalypse. And if you want us to talk about weird Alan Davis stories, you can definitely go on over there as well and throw a couple of bucks our way. And there's other things you can do there too. We've got a Discord that's fun. We've got content. Go check it out. And then you can support cool stuff that people who are cool are doing. I don't think it's a bold statement to say what we're doing on the average is cooler than Ages of Apocalypse.
I have to agree. Well, we should probably start by at least telling people what these issues are, because it's all over the map. This is not like a sequential thing.
It is all over the map. So this is... You remember the 12? We've already talked about the 12, but you remember the 12.
It was bad.
The mutant circuit?
Yes.
The
mutant technology?
So, we have the 5 and the 6 and the 2, which is the fastball special. This is the 12.
Right. Which I know is coming back at some point.
It's so dumb, and someone's going to recontextualize it, and people are going to say, well, actually, the 12 was good, and they're wrong, because the 12 is like 5 or 6 issues. And then, at the end of the 12, Apocalypse merges with our boy Scott Summers.
Right, who's saving X-Man. So X-Man does not become Apocalypse and, reconstitute all of reality. And yet he still manages to reconstitute some of reality here.
Yes. So what Apocalypse does, for dubious as heck reasons, can't really tell why, is shunt everyone into their own weird separate realities. So 5 books, Uncanny X-Men, Cable, Wolverine, X-Men Unlimited, and X-Men, Volume 2, were all thrown into their own sub-realities. So there's a bunch of books there. Let's do a quick rundown of everything that's in here.
Sure.
Just so
it's a lot.
We've got it. So it's a lot. So there's Uncanny X-Men's the first one. That's an Alan Davis, Terry Kavanagh, Adam Kubert, and Graham Nolan book. Mm-hmm. Which, Adam, what's that? What's the gist of that one?
Silver Age X-Men, except no Cyclops, and we've got Gambit, Storm, and is it just Gambit and Storm that are the replacements here?
Gambit and Storm replace Cyclops and Angel,
right? And Iceman looks kind of mushy. Anyway, you know,
the Brotherhood's fun and weird.
Yes, like Toad is Marrow, and there's a couple. Polaris just looks kind of bored.
She's the Scarlet Witch.
Right. She's got a green
Sunfire's
version.
Quicksilver.
Yeah. They end up at a carnival and face off, and Cyclops appears out of nowhere, and everybody's starting to realize that they're not where they're supposed to be. And then they wake up in the room where the big pinball room where they were doing the 12 thing. It's not very exciting.
At the same time, it's not. At the same time, you've got Cable, which is by Joe Pruitt with Bernard Chang on art, which is weird because Cable is dreaming of Egypt times.
Yeah, and has like backup in X-Men Samurai that show up, which is weird.
Very confusing, doesn't make any sense. But that's fine, because as soon as that's through, we move on over to Eric Larson and Roger Cruz's Wolverine. Which, Adam, if I was going to say one of these concepts out of the 5 appealed to you the most, I would think it's this one in general.
Well, this one made me mad, because I was like, oh, it's the new Fantastic Four from Simonson and Art Adams by Eric Larson, and who's doing the art here? Roger Cruz, right?
Yep.
And let's just save it, because I want to talk about all of these together. But suffice to say, it did not meet my expectations.
There's Unlimited X-Men. Mm-hmm. Which is by Joe Pruitt and Brett Booth. I'm going to be completely and totally honest. I did fall asleep while reading this one, and I cannot recall what happened.
Well, this is
Folks,
sort of the
I promise you I read all of these. I did sleep.
This one's the On the Moon book, right? Where
Yes.
a futuristic version of the X-Men fight against a newer version of the Four Horsemen, which includes what? Caliban, Ahab, who else? Warbird, and who's the fourth one?
Davin Shikari. You may know him better as Eric the Red.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it's Eric the Red, but he's like a demon. Yeah, so that one's really bad, and everybody's super long because it's Brett Booth art.
Just makes people look like they're made out of Laffy Taffy.
So long. And then, the real strange finale of these is Alan Davis. And it's the future, right?
Yeah, it's 100 years in the future. And it's the X-Men, and none of them have died. Everyone's very old.
Right. Yeah.
And it's interesting. Beast is a hippie. Storm has just become this elemental being. They live on a planet for X-Men called X-World.
Yeah.
They have become the central hub of the galaxy. Like, listen, a lot of these concepts are currently being done in X-Men, and I'm here for them. So I can't say too much. Like, Alan Davis had some good ideas on this one, and it's probably my favorite of the 5.
Absolutely.
It might be because it's all Alan Davis art.
Yeah, well, I mean, that helps a lot because the art is very inconsistent throughout these. But the big problem that I have with this whole thing is that there's no real connective tissue between any of it. I was expecting there to be a through line, but in each of the issues, it seems that there's the alternate reality that then kicks the characters. Once they figure out what's going on, they get kicked back into the actual reality. But then it doesn't really make sense why some of them don't wake up and others do, and when, and like it all seems to be kind of resolved after the first issue, and yet we get 4 more additional alternate realities which have nothing to do with each other. So
it's weird that there's no internal consistency, and it's very weird that there is no narrative momentum to any of this.
No, there's nothing holding them together other than, at some point in each issue that the Cyclops Apocalypse amalgam is going to show up. What do they call him? Cypocalypse?
Yes.
I like
Cypocalypse.
that. He's going to show up and he's going to like wreak havoc and say, haha, muhahaha, I'm going to conquer the world or whatever. But then nothing really happens. Because this lead into search for Cyclops?
Eventually, it takes a bit.
Yeah. So back to your question about the new Fantastic Four. Yes, that one ticked me off because Monsters Unleashed is one of I love the Simonson run of Fantastic Four, and to see Larson revisit this concept, I was like, this is going to be fun. And it's just not. There's not a lot going on.
It's not. I don't like Roger Cruz's art in general, so it didn't help. I actually don't like the Eric Larson run of Wolverine at all. I think it's pretty bad. It does... If there's one thing about Eric Larson's run on Wolverine, it's that he seems very adamantly to believe that Wolverine and Carol Danvers should be a couple.
Yeah.
And this was back in the 90s, and I'm like, yeah, no, this is a great pairing, and they should be the power couple of the Marvel Universe, but that's fine.
Yeah, I
just think Wolverine should be with a powerful lady.
Absolutely. I know some people ship him with Storm, and I kind of get that, even though it's not my favorite thing in the world. But I don't have a problem with Cruz's art there. I think he's doing a fine job. It's just there's not much story here to back up any of this. Like, there's no real reason for Cable to be fighting a war in Egypt with samurai Magneto. They have a history. Well, what is it? I don't know. What is this? There's nothing going through each of these stories to connect them together. So there's not much interest to push you towards the next issue. I think the Alan Davis issue is at least interesting because the concepts it presents are kind of fascinating. Like, here's a fun future version of the X-Men that I want to know more about. Like, I want to know why these characters ended up like they did. But it's just that one issue, and then we'll never go back to that ever again.
Never again will the X-Men have their own planet.
Never. So yeah, I think this one's a bit of a dud. It is, I guess, mildly interesting, but
mildly is saying a lot. Again, I fell asleep reading one of these.
Well, just with most sequential storytelling or episodic storytelling, like, you want a reason to go to the next issue, and I didn't find one. Like, I was happy that it at least ended on a high note with that Alan Davis issue, but even that, it doesn't really have much of a connection to the 12, and it didn't make me want to know what happened next because I knew it wasn't going to be in that reality.
So let's go ahead and rank this bad boy then.
Yes.
We rank things here, Adam.
We sure do. On what, though? What is this that we rank them on?
On our list of 522 X-Men stories, ranked from best to worst. We've been doing this for years now, folks, and we're getting pretty good at figuring out where things need to go. We're lasering in. Pew, pew. The number 1 story on our list is Hoxpox. The number 100 story on our list is Messiah War. The number 200 story on our list is The Trial of Jean Grey. Number 300 on our list is the Schism tie-ins, The Generation Hope. The number 400 story on our list is the Dazzler Thor arc of A-Force. Number 500 on our list is Dazzler X Song. And 522 is the Draco.
Boo. Well, at 493, we have Apocalypse the 12. Is this better or worse than the 12?
Worse. Apocalypse the 12 is bad, but it has a narrative where this is...
Does not.
This is wild and long, and I'm so tired of it in the art, with the exception of Art Adams. And the Kubert stuff's fine. I'm just not a huge Kubert guy.
There's no Art Adams in this. You mean... I know what
Not
you
Art
mean.
Adams. I meant Alan Davis. I'm
You mean
sorry,
Alan
Art Adams.
That's okay. No,
This
you're,
is the second
you're
time
absolutely
that
right.
I've screwed up an Art Adams credit since Adam and I have been recording. We've already cut out the one.
So I'm going to go down. I don't think this is like offensive. I just think it's kind of boring. So
Here's what I'd say. It's probably better than Axis, right?
Yeah, Axis is at 495. And in between there, we've got 494 is X-Men 43 to 45 and Avengers 53, which is the Silver Age Avengers versus the X-Men. I think that's better than this.
That one's better.
So this would be our new 495?
Yes, it would be. This is Ages of Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Apocalypse, not actually in this story very much at all.
No. Makes some slight appearances. Speaking of stories that are named Apocalypse but don't actually have much apocalypse in them, what's this next one we've got here, Zach?
Next one we got here is Apocalypse War from Extraordinary X-Men. Apocalypse Wars, if you don't know, was a 2016 summer event to coincide with the movie X-Men Apocalypse. So there was Apocalypse story in both Extraordinary X-Men, All New X-Men, and Uncanny X-Men, which were the X-Men books that were going on at the time.
Right.
Important to note, Apocalypse was dead, and regular 616 Apocalypse does not appear in any of those stories.
No, it is one of the more bananas editorial mandates, especially given that it is during this period where Marvel is sort of shying away from the marketing of the X line. And
yet they still tied in to the Fox movie X-Men Apocalypse.
Yeah. Except these books do not cross over. They have nothing in common. I'm talking about the little icon itself, Apocalypse, where it's each of these stories in each of the books. We're just covering Extraordinary right now, but none of them have anything to do with one another whatsoever. Now, what Lemire decides to do here with Ramos, I think is
Humberto Ramos and Jeff Lemire, by the way.
Yeah, I think this is probably the most interesting of the three. And I gotta say, rereading this as a whole, I was like, okay, I see what Lemire's doing here, and I don't hate it. I don't absolutely hate it. So we should probably just give a little distillation of what's happening in this story, right?
I mean, yeah, we should. So, this is during the Terrigen times.
Yes.
When the X-Men were banished to hell.
Yes. And mutants have been sterilized by the Terrigen cloud, apparently.
Yes.
So no new mutants. You could do it, Zach. Just grit your teeth. Come on.
It was such a
dumb idea.
Lemire.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I like Jeff Lemire as a creator. I've read Jeff Lemire comics that have made me cry. Underwater Welder is incredibly good. I just the amount of not good stuff that Jeff Lemire had to deal with. Boy, oh boy, it throws me off. But so mutants are sterilized, and Storm finds out on Cerebro, or whatever they're using these days, that there's 600 new mutants. So they send a team to get them. And the most important mission that they could have is when Colossus says, hey, y'all, I've been training some X-Men kids. Can we handle this one? So Colossus goes with Ernst, No Girl, Anale, and my boy Glob Herman.
To fight?
The Sugar Man.
That's right. And can we just take a moment?
I don't know.
Well, Sugar Man's always been sort of lurking around in the background, but he is the one that has created this little sort of orb filled with, I guess, it's never really described how there's 600
mutant embryos.
Yeah, they're going to be 600 mutants potentially born out of this orb, which he very much intends to send into the far future, where I guess he is aware of another age of apocalypse, because that's where our characters end up. But before we talk about the arc anymore, I just want to give props to Humberto Ramos, who does a fantastic Sugar Man. Like, most people do a terrible Sugar Man. Ramos does a great Sugar Man.
Ramos fits with Sugar Man. Like, that's the right aesthetic. There's some characters that Ramos does a real bad job with. I don't think Sugar Man is one of them.
No.
I think Ramos does a pretty darn good job with the Sugar Man.
Yep.
I'm not a huge Ramos fan. I actually think that Ramos works best with Spider-Man, and I know a lot of Spider-Man fans have gotten tired of him, but the way that he does exaggerated motion and like contorted bodies and all that stuff when he's doing action, it really fits for Peter Parker. Fits less for Storm.
Sure. Yeah.
Wolverine.
Yeah. Everybody's kind of made a Laffy Taffy. So anyway, like you were saying, the kids get sent to the future first, and the rest of the team catches up. But the kids have already been there a year, and this is where I think the story really does a nice job. Is we get this standalone issue
9
of what the kids have been up to and how they've been evolved. Now, unfortunately, all of this evolution for these 4 characters has kind of been forgotten about. Like, Anale gets huge over the course of this single year, and yet
Anale gets so swole.
He's back to sort of just being skinny mini Anale in today's New Mutants. So I guess they just kind of forgot about that.
Here's what happened. Have you ever heard of the phrase, if you don't use it, you lose it?
Yes.
The moment Anale no longer had to live in a dystopic hellscape, he stopped working out. Just immediately. He's like, nope. Glob looks no different, which is great.
Yeah, no, Glob is just sort of globby. So
love it.
This is also
Lemire deserves credit for Glob. I love his Glob. He's good. He has a crush on Jean Grey. It's very cute. And he thinks about her the entire time he's in the future, which would seem weird, except for it's very obviously positioned as the thing that Glob is using to, like, anchor himself back to his own reality and, like, saying that he has a life back on Earth, which he really kind of doesn't. So he's holding on to whatever he can. And I think that's an adorable and incredible thing for my boy Glob.
Yeah. I think it reads as cute more than anything else. I think he writes the 4 characters very, very well. Obviously, No Girl doesn't have any lines. But, you know, their adventures through these sort of bubble worlds that they travel through is really fun. I think less fun is the fact that when they're here in the future, they are trying to protect the orb from Apocalypse's new horsemen, who include Colossus, Venom, Deadpool, and a future version of Moon Knight, who must have been a blast to draw for Ramos, but there's no real like character behind any of it. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
The problem is the last 3 issues of this 5-issue arc are just a big fight scene between the X-Men and the Horsemen, which is pretty disappointing. They're cool designs. I mean, like, this was at the same time that Lemire was doing his Moon Knight run, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. So definitely pulling in some of that. His Deadpool has his mouth sewn shut, which is a great choice. And I understand that we were mad at the 20th Century Fox Corporation for that at one point in our lives, but I think we've all grown past that and understood that maybe they made the right choice.
Yeah, and ultimately, I don't think the story really makes sense. Apocalypse is said to want the orb. Then it's said that he was trusting the kids to handle the orb. Then he destroys it because they didn't do a good enough job or something like that. And it really doesn't make a lot of sense. It's one of these stories where you know that Apocalypse does what he does long view, because he wants mutant kind to be the strongest it can possibly be. This is a story that doesn't quite understand Apocalypse's motivations, to the point where at the end of the story, they end up bringing the like shrunken, shriveled up Apocalypse back to X-Haven because they think he's the only one that can fix Colossus, and yet they don't have Colossus either. So bit of a mixed bag.
I know we've talked about this. I don't know if it's been on the show, but you and I have talked about this. Was Apocalypse ever good before, like, 2 years ago? Like, legitimately, was Apocalypse ever actually a good character until about 2 years ago? Because I'm not sure that Apocalypse was good yet. I think he was just important.
He's good conceptually. I think that the current version of Apocalypse that we got was definitely the best version of the character that we've gotten since Simonson's Fall of the Mutants version of the character, because there's so many times that like people just don't quite understand what to do with him or why he is what he is, and it's only recently that we've finally gotten like the whole picture of what he was all about, but that's only because it's been retconned that way. So I will say,
but it was a good retcon.
It's a fantastic retcon.
There were swords.
Yeah. I will say, to give Lemire some credit here, I think that the story building with Magic and Sapna that's happening sort of in the background as the B plot to this story is pretty interesting. I remember these issues as they were coming out. I haven't revisited them in a while, but to read it all as an arc, I thought, it actually held together pretty well. But we've said this before, the editorial mandates that are just being placed on him are just too much. He's got to tie in the Inhumans stuff. He's got to tie in this Apocalypse story, which is just, I don't think it has anything to do with the story he wants to tell. So it's a real mixed bag.
He's finding a way to keep telling the one story he wants to tell about Ileana and Sapna. And that's it.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, we've got 3 Extraordinary X-Men stories on this list right now. At 167 is Extraordinary X-Men 17, which is that tie-in to IVX, where it's a good story.
That's a good one.
201 is Kingdom's Fall, which is the story we were just talking about. And then 374 is Extraordinary X-Men 1 through 5, the opening arc, which is bad.
Yeah, this is definitely better.
I think this is probably worse than Kingdom's Fall, but yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely in between those two, because it's not nearly as bad as the opening arc, but I don't think it's as good as the conclusion of the Ileana Sapna story. So,
yeah,
we're somewhere.
Like, Schism is at 293, and Schism's better.
I would agree. I think we're in the 300s probably here.
Or defo in the 300s.
Yeah. How do you feel against something like
Death of X is 3?
Where's Death of X? 350?
350 is Death of X. I think Death of X is better.
Okay, so
we just reread that recently.
Yeah, no, I would agree. So we're in between 350 and 375 here. I think this is probably better than 356 Aurora Better Before the Storm. How do you feel against something like X-Core at 353?
I think X-Core is probably a better story. Oh, actually, this is a good comparison.
Okay.
At 355, just 2 spots down, is Buncanny X-Men 1 through 5, Survival of the Fittest.
Yeah, that first arc.
Which I think is I think is on par, but definitely loses a lot of steam with some of the worst Greg Land art that Greg Land's ever done.
Absolutely. I think this is better than that. So that leaves us with Generation X.
I don't think this is better than Christmas Fear.
Okay. So this is going to be our new 355.
This will be our new 355 Extraordinary X-Men Apocalypse War.
And our final story for today is an interesting one. Back in 2008, there was a series of one-shots called X-Men Black. But the one villain they did not give a standalone issue to was Apocalypse. So what they did was they did a full-size issue, but as backups, which was an interesting choice.
Yeah. They did backups to all 5 issues with Apocalypse. And we're just going to call it X-Men Black Apocalypse because that's what it is. It's written by friends of the show, Zach Thompson and Lonnie Nadler, whose recent book, Undone by Blood, or The Other Side of Eden, just finished up last week. And it's great, and you should check it out. It's got Sammy Cave on art, and it's... If you like Westerns... Or if you don't like Westerns, you're gonna... Do you like stories with Wolverine in it? And then more stories that deal with the ramifications of Wolverine being a sad cowboy? You're gonna like this book. It's good. But no, Zach and Lonnie do it. Geraldo Borges does the pencils and inks. Michelle Rosenberg on those colors.
Yeah, and this is an interesting story. I feel like we had not seen Apocalypse in the actual Apocalypse in quite some time, as you mentioned. So,
Because we hadn't.
Yeah.
Do you know when the last time we saw him was?
When's actual?
Do you know when the
Apocalypse?
last time? Blood of Apocalypse, right after Decimation, with Peter Milligan and Salvador Larroca,
Wow.
where he jumps into the Celestial Portal. Hey, do you know how he came back?
No, I have no idea.
Neither do I.
Well, it should. It should
Not
have
100%
something-
sure Zach and Lonnie know either, but that's
No.
fine.
Well, and to give them credit, what they do here is really interesting. This story is very much a standalone. You're not sure where it takes place. You're not quite sure when it takes place, but it could be used as a transition between multiple states because we start with Apocalypse in a laboratory working on creating the next host body for him that is going to be completely immortal and nothing is ever going to be able to stop it. He's using a machine he's dubbed the Finch, and he has all of these different human bodies that he's using here. And something goes wrong. The host that he's trying to manipulate into this sort of immortal, strong host reacts very, very poorly. And I think I remember Zach and Lonnie saying that this was very influenced by the movie Annihilation, which I'm a huge fan of, as well as the book, because Apocalypse ends up in this very, very interesting, weird, colorful, like almost fantasy land of, things trying to kill him. And he is slowly devolving back into a human and then into a primate before he starts to sort of figure out where he is and what he's supposed to do. It's a pretty cool setup.
So, yeah, I totally agree with a lot of those influences. I know Zach, in his newsletter, recommended a book called Fauna by Christine Vadnis. Which is a book about a small town going through rapid evolution, and it has a lot of that same. Like I can reading these two on the same weekend. Like obviously this came out after that X-Men story, but like you can tell everything's playing in that same kind of bubble of nature and like what makes you human and stories that are more about setting a tone and giving you a sense of wonder and dread more than telling like a tight narrative.
Well,
and I really love that in this.
Yeah, it's also a version of this character that we have never seen, and I don't think we'll ever see again, in that he is transforming And as he's devolving is also just sort of realizing, that he's not experienced things like thirst or weakness in eons. So this is like a very weird thing for him to be going through. However, he does eventually defeat his captors, who kind of look like his human...
As a monkey.
Right. He's devolved back into a primate, and there are versions of the humans that he's been experimenting on, but they look kind of like celestials. And he manages to...
Yeah, the Finch evolved them and de-evolved him.
Right. So it kind of turns out that he's living inside of a world based on his... What? Like his genetic structure? Is that the explanation that's given here? I forget what the world is.
It's a whole world of him.
Right. So everything's trying to kill him.
Everything is hyper evolving.
Yeah. Yep. And everything's trying to kill him to make him stronger. So it's a really high concept idea, and I think it works really well.
I think it especially works for what it is because this is a backup. So you have to have specific beats for each chapter. Like every few pages, you have to have a change.
Right.
So it's first issue sets it up. The next 3 are progressively devolving him, putting Apocalypse in the worst places he could be, to the point that issue 4, he is speaking not in dialogue boxes in so much as descriptions of the next action he is going to take.
Yeah.
It is 100%. It is no longer self-actualization. It is survival, and that's a really cool way to literalize the high concept of Apocalypse, of his survival of the fittest. And I think for this kind of story, it works really well as a nice little self-contained backup. I think the art by Borges really works here.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Rosenberg's colors add a huge amount of mood to this.
I 100% agree. I think the art gives it more of an indie comic feel. It feels very sci-fi and out there. And like I said, it could serve as a transition point between like Apocalypse playing in some sort of celestial sandbox and then returning to Earth, because you don't really know where he's coming from and where he escapes to at the end of the story. It's just this self-contained world that he gets trapped in and then escapes from. So I think it's fantastic. I would say as a publishing concept, even though it works as backup stories, it's interesting because I think this is one of the stronger X-Men Black stories of the X-Men Black stories that came out. So it kind of stinks that it's just relegated to the backups, but they do a fantastic job with it.
It's probably my second favorite of them. I love X-Men Black, Emma Frost. We talked about that one.
Yeah.
That one is the real winner. Then I think this one works. Then I like the Mojo one. Then I'd have to read the other 3 again because I'm pretty much...
Yeah, they're a mixed bag. But I do think that's to its detriment that, when you picked up the X-Men Black issues, if you were just going for like, oh, I like Mystique, I got part 3 of this story. So am I going to seek out parts 1, 2? Am I going to buy the rest of it? I don't know. As a publishing concept, it's an interesting one, but I like it. I think it's a really cool story.
There was a hot second that every X book, like every week there was a primary X-Men book that was coming out. Mm-hmm. So it was X-Men Black for 5 weeks, and then it was the 10-week / 11-week Uncanny X-Men Disassembled stuff that was going through, and then they went bi-weekly on the rest of Uncanny until Hoxpox, which was then a 12-part weekly series.
It's a ton of comics. It's pretty wild. And
then they had new books for 6 weeks straight.
Yeah.
After that.
I mean, the publishing schedule is crazy. Even through the pandemic. I mean, I realize they got slowed down by the pandemic, but it's pretty amazing. All right, let's rank this bad boy. This is definitely better than Extraordinary X-Men Apocalypse War at 355. And where do we have Emma Frost's X-Men Black?
Emma Frost is at 93.
Okay.
So it's not that high.
Right.
X-Men Black Mojo is at 266, and I think it's significantly better than that.
I would agree. I think we're
Like, okay, 152 is Extermination. How do you feel compared to that?
I think this is a nice, like, this is very tight, you know? Like, it's a strong narrative from beginning to end, and it's a really good, like, standalone story.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is better than that. So I think we're probably
I
in
would
the 100s.
tend to agree.
Yeah.
We're definitely in the 100s. I don't want to go too terribly far, because like at 145 is Assault on Weapon Plus.
Yeah.
Which I think is a better story than this. And Zach, Lonnie, if you're listening, Assault on Weapon Plus, it's pretty good. I like you guys. It's pretty good.
No, I think you've zoned in almost exactly where we should be. Like, I've got Jean Grey Psych Wars highlighted, and I think we're probably on par with that.
I would go just slightly higher and push it above the Quest for Nightcrawler from Amazing X-Men at 148.
Okay.
But that Amazing X-Men, Avengers vs. X-Men, Jean Grey, those are good territory. Man, Avengers vs. X-Men. We forgot that Avengers vs. X-Men is super entertaining, and everyone forgets that until they go back and read it. Isn't that right? Is that right? Like, every time, it seems too high, but like, it was a fun read.
Sure. Yeah, it's a mess, but it was enjoyable. So, okay. Well, are you saying
beautiful mess.
It's better or worse than that?
I think this is better than Avengers vs. X-Men, better than Amazing X-Men 1-5, worse than Wanted Wolverine, Dead or Alive, where they go to Canada.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. So this is going to be our new 148.
This will be our new number 148, a solid showing
for
X-Men Black Apocalypse.
Man, those stories were, for the most part, very fit and did survive.
I mean, they've done worse, so we got that going for us. But we're done with the episode now. We've ranked all of our stories, and we have got to thank Matthew Thompson again for that, because Matthew went on over to patreon.com/comicsxf, tossed a couple of dollars our way, and that keeps the site running. So we're really happy about that.
Thanks, you,
Matthew. Beyond that, if you want to be like, I already gave the pitch at the beginning of the show. You don't need to hear it again. Support us or don't. I'm not your dad. I don't care. Adam, what do you got going on?
Guys, you can always follow me on Twitter at Arthur Stacy. And what do we got on tap next week, Zach?
Next week on tap, we've got Weird 70s Beast Stories, is what I wrote down.
Very cool.
I feel like sometimes people don't understand what we have to go through when someone pitches a story, and instead of the most obvious thing that we could tie that story to, I choose the weirdest thing that we could do. Because here's the thing about Beast in the 70s. He was mostly on the Avengers and the Defenders. Not the...
Champions?
No, he didn't join the Defenders until the 80s.
Okay.
He was mostly on the Avengers, and I did not read that. Did not read Avengers in the 1970s.
You weren't alive.
It has Wonder Man, and I don't like Wonder Man. We're gonna talk about that. But until then, folks, this has been Battle of the Atom. We hope you survived the experience.
Get it!